squad, which is really interesting, is there's like a new kill squad comp that a lot of people have been trying, and it's been working like really, really well. And what people have been doing for guilds that don't have bows, or they have bows but they don't necessarily have all these other players, is they've just been going like quad melee and quad groups. So like where you see fire staff in here, like they're dropping the fire staff. Where you see bow in here, some people are considering dropping bow and just go quad melee. It's a group that does really, really well when you are able to take advantage and like have the tempo. Like if you're going first, it does really, really well. But if you sit back and let people shoot you, it's obviously not going to do super well because it's a bunch of melee players. So it's really, really good in certain situations. And what some groups have been doing is they've been switching comps in fort. So like in fort, that maybe they throw on the quad melee because it just wins super, super hard versus range, because fire staff just cannot get away from it. Bow can get away from it, which is why bow is still sometimes used, but fire staff really cannot get away from that kind of thing. But in terms of comp, I wanted to go through kind of a Barebones one. So this is taking out all the slots that are a little bit more variable and just kind of have the slots that are set in stone right now. And from there you can see the slots that are probably the easiest ones are the most consistent ones to get into a war lift, and then the other ones are more flex slots. So how many people do we have that are variable? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, these aren't really variable. It's just you can run hatchet or you can run rapier. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's like 12 variable slots and everything else is kind of locked in place at this point. There are some people that would consider these IGVGs to be variable slots as well, because I think Prim tried doing 2 IGVGs. I really do not like that cook of dropping IGVGs and think it's like really, really bad. So I'm putting those in as a you need to have these, even though they might not necessarily be a you need to have them for every single company. But it's so important of a slot that doesn't really make sense to not run. Made noteworthy things from a point team standpoint, you need to have an SNS. They almost always need to have an IG now. Before, this could be a flail slot, but the issue is people have been dropping more and more IGs in slots where it's a variable if you could drop an IG or not. So like where people are running IGVG, people might be running Spear Hatchet now. People might be running SNS Great Axe. And when people are dropping those kind of slots, you kind of need to pick up IGs where you can, so it makes sense for SNS IG to start picking up the slack in terms of picking up that spare slot. The parts I have variable on here, there is often a flail IG slot that's specific for the IGL. Some IGLs prefer IGVG, some people prefer flail IG. Some people actually have hands, and you can just forget about this slot and do a more optimized point comp. But that's what that slot is for. And then this last slot down here at the bottom right, this is usually a fire staff in current wars. The idea behind it is that you have 4 people in this group that need heals if you don't go the fire staff, so you kind of need to have the fire staff to take some pressure off of the healer, because the healer is having to heal a lot of people that are going to be taking a lot of damage. So that's where that idea comes from of the fire staff. The slot is flexible though. Like some people have run IGVG there in the past. Some people have like done like a triple Great Axe Warhammer with a shot caller on a 500 con Great Axe Warhammer, and they just use that guy to initiate crashes. Like people have cooked a lot in the slot. BBIG is okay in some instances, like BBVG if you're playing bot point and just trying to force people off of the bottom area of your point can be okay. Spear Hatchet can be okay. Like it's a very flexible slot, but Fire Staff seems to be relatively good because it can do damage to point. Plays relatively safe. And just is kind of one of those builds that keeps people honest. That's what you really want in a slot, is a build that kind of keeps people honest. Moving on to quads, a Great Axe Warhammer is set in stone at this point. IGVG is set in stone, at least for these 2 slots. There is a debate if these need to be heavy or if they can be blade. I'd argue that you probably could run blade, but the people that are forcing blade aren't like doing the fundamentals of why IGVG is good, so blade doesn't really make sense to force in every single slot. If all the blade players were consistently dropping showers and people are looking for crashes and were like aware of their positioning and weren't just chasing people off into Narnia because they have a void blade, it definitely could be optimal to run a blade in that slot. It's like about as tanky, it does a lot more damage, has a lot more pressure, In a lot of ways, Blade IGVG is just an upgrade over IGVG and Heavy. But this is, for these, I have them as 2 Heavy slots because I think it's more consistent and it's probably easier to find across building a roster, especially like one that's New World League oriented. I also have Fire Staffs in here for the top quads. Idea behind this is similar to the point team, where this is often a Fire Staff slot. Fire Staffs, they tend to not take a lot of resources to keep alive, and they can put out pressure, which makes them very good as the force slot in groups that you don't want to be resource intensive. This is like very different from what you saw at the end of that last war. If you're watching this back, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but a lot of people have been kind of experimenting with tri or quad DPS groups, where all those DPS players are melee oriented. It has a lot of pressure, but the instant that group kind of slows down and has damage put upon them and they're on the back foot, it can't really catch up because they're so behind on heals all the time. And Fire Staff is just like a build that kind of compensates for that pretty well. For your bottom groups, it's a little bit different, right? Because you're not always pushing for space, so they're a little bit more sedentary, and that lets you get a little bit more creative with the slot. The typical build for the current meta in this sort of slot that's looking particularly inward to point, they're basically playing on point at this point, is a Spear Hatchet. A Spear Hatchet just has a lot of neutral pressure, has access to sweep, which is really good at hunting down IGVGs. Is really good at just making people not want to step on the point. Like if a healer steps on the point and they get swept and they can just get blown up instantly. So it's a really good build. Like a lot of these that I keep talking about that keeps people honest in that last slot. And it just brings a lot of pressure and has been like one of the adaptations. One thing that you've also seen now a lot recently is people have been dropping this IGVG slot for the bottom areas because people have been like kind of pushing to get off the point in the top areas, and then they run an additional melee there as well. I'd argue it's greedy. I'd argue that people have a big enough issue with trying to get vines off to the point where it's not really worth it. I think I will change both of these to Blade, though, because Blade is like a bit of a hybrid, right, where it has good pressure, so it's similar to that Spear Hatchet, but it also allows you to perform the normal functions as an IGVG, so it's like if you're playing in those bot areas, you can kind of keep people honest in that sense where you can kind of force them off. But you still could have that value of dropping a shower. So it's like similar to running quad melee, but it's a little bit cheating because you have a void blade, so it's not really the same thing. So that's like generally what those groups look like now. And this is from looking at like, I'd say 4 to 5 different like T1 to T2 rosters that I've kind of looked at, and then also just like thinking about stuff. The kill squad meta has probably been the most interesting development. The biggest changes that have impacted Kill Squad are Greatsword's homing distance has been significantly reduced to a point where it's not consistent. It's also a build that, like, if you get called out because you have a Greatsword, people are just going to target you and you're probably not going to be able to play the game. And if you're not able to play the game, you're not really going to get value with it. So what people have done, because Greatsword hasn't felt as good as of recent, is they've been switching to other builds. The 2 builds that people have been swapping to a lot are Spear SNS, which is kind of the standard one. And then people have been going Great Axe, Spear, and Medium. Or, sorry, not Great Axe, Spear. Great Axe, SNS, and Medium. And they use an illegal round shield with a protection. So that is a good damage kind of hybrid combo. I would argue that at least 2 of these are mandatory in all phases at this point. The main advantage that the Great Axe has is with the Great Axe, you can run Reap, you could run Charge, you could run Grav. So it just has a lot of pressure, has a lot of good ways of forcing out people's dodge. You pull them back in with Reap and you get the kill. SNS is your initiator. So you have, Leaping Strike to get in. You have ways to slow people down. If you force the Stone Form after that, you can look to finish them off with the Great Axe. So you have Bloodlust, so you can just keep up with people. It's a class that constantly keeps the pressure on people and feels like it's the main meta breaker. But because we don't have Greatsword anymore, that opens up IG to be really good, which is why Fire Staff IG is being slotted, I think, a lot more now. Also, most Fire Staffs are okay with running 200 con and 450 int at this point. And because they're at 200 con, IG makes a lot more sense. I think if Fire Staffs are at 100 con, it doesn't really make sense to go Fire Staff IG, but because people have been pushing the con up to around 200, they're able to live a lot more consistently, and the Fire Staff IG just starts to make sense. I think you can get away with 150 if you want to be a little bit greedy. Some people were talking about cooking Fire Staff Void Gauntlet. That seems extremely greedy to me. But maybe in situations where you're in a very safe spot, so like if you're this bottom point team player, like you can get away with it, but it just sounds so greedy to me, and I don't really see a ton of benefit coming from it. Uh, but that's why IG has kind of been in development. These light staffs at the bottom here, where I don't put in their thing, these are typically hatchet players, but if you're really, really good at the game, you probably can make rapier work. Hatchet just lives a lot better versus all the classes that can just get on top of you, which spear, sword and shield, great axe, and spear if they go scorpion, just instantly get on top of you. And hatchet gives you grit and just lets you passively live in those engagements. So I would generally recommend hatchet for those slots, but some people do get away with rapier. And I think that's most of the stuff that's flexible here. And then these other slots I think are really specific to how you want to run the kill squad. I have this set up in a 1-3 setup, which in that war we just did, we did 1-3 for about half of it. And then we switched to 2-2, and then we won outside, and inside I don't know what we ran. So like both are pretty common to do 1-3 or to do 10-10. When I say 1-3, I mean one group and then 3 groups. And the 3 groups are usually on Oppo wrapping the edge. So you have groups that are kind of going around this way, if you will. But with 2-2, you're a little bit more balanced, and that does some, or allows you to do some more creative things in terms of slots. And you basically, with 1-3, the main strategy is to, I don't really show this well here, maybe I can make a new one. But with 1-3, the main strategy, if we're looking like from a blue perspective, like saying you're on attack, you're looking to win this top right area, and you're looking to kind of win this bottom left, and inadvertently you'll win this bottom right just because you have space in all 3. You're not really looking to push top left a ton, but people will just naturally kind of glob the top left, and anytime someone enters in your space, you're just constantly dogging. The problem that Tenacity had is they're like really respecting crashes in these bot areas, but as long as people aren't on the outside of you, you can just back up for free anytime that you want. So you really can just be greedy and dog people on the edges if you're doing a 10-10 split. So that's something that's like kind of interesting there. But I'd say 1-3 is a bit more standard in NA, 10-10 or 2-2, whatever you want to call it. 10-10 being 10 players on one side, 10 on the other. 2-2 being 2 groups on one side, 2 on the other. 1-3 being 1 group on one side, 3 on the other. Like all those variants are viable. It's just you need to play to your win con. And it creates a lot of interesting matchups where, you know, you have like a one comp that's going 1-3 and another comp that's going 2-2, and creates a lot of like counterplay and a lot of variety there. In terms of, so I've gone through kind of the high level of what comps look like when they're not really flexible. I guess does anyone in chat have any like questions about this, or does this make a little bit more sense than the one that I put out the other day? Because I know I put out one the other day, and there are a few takes in there. I think I ran a lot of IGVGs. Yeah, there's a lot of IGVGs thrown in here, and then I did Fire Staff with Finisher. I did do the caveat for Fire Staff with Finisher where I said if Greatsword isn't meta, then IG makes a little bit more sense. If assuming people are willing to run the extra con, because you kind of need to have a little bit of extra con with IG. But does that make sense to anyone, or is there something, or is there other stuff I should probably go into there before I kind of move on? We good? Think we're good? All right. All right then. So the other part here is I went into a few mocks. This first one I think is the best comp that you can slot right now, or maybe a little bit of variance of this in the kill squad depending on how you want to like run certain comps. But I think in terms of point, in terms of quads, this is probably how I would run it, and it's like relatively set in stone. So this stuff is like going to be pretty consistent, I think, for New World League in terms of Group 1 through Group 6. Group 7 to Group 10 depend a little bit on the meta, but there's certain spots that are kind of locked in, which I tried to kind of go over with this Barebones roster. So like Great Axe Warhammer, there's always going to be a need for those. Like one tank with SNS IG, there's always going to be a need for that. There's always a need for a lot of life staff players. There's a need for at least 4 fire staff players. There's a need for, in my opinion, at least 4 VG players with some variance between heavy and some variance between blade builds. And then later today, I think I'll probably go into a mock blade build just to cook one up, because I think some people were asking for it. So there's definitely some constants. S Great Axe is probably a new one that's definitely a constant, but everything else is relatively similar to where it was. Uh, if you have an in-game lead, so this is going into my best in slot comp possible. So if you have an in-game lead that has hands, by what I mean by that, if they could play a actual slot that's normally used in a war and not a spectate slot. So like not using his name because he's bad, but like apples, which he's in my opinion not as a shot caller, but like you take like apples or like Kilash when they used to play, you pretty much always just threw him on Flail IG because all you wanted to do is you wanted your IGO to live so they can consistently call crashes in certain spots, and there was not really a large downside to doing so. By running an extra Flail IG, you now put yourself in a spot where you're going to be weaker on the outsides, and I tried to draw that out here. So if I run one SNS, which is blue aura is the SNS, so if I take one of these away, like you pretty much just have to stack on top of wherever your relentless user is, and while you have coverage on the center point, you'll notice that you're missing coverage on the outsides pretty consistently. And what that leads to is you could have snowballs with kill squads with people that are running double tank, and they have one near the outside, one near the inside. And that is just generally not favorable. You can try to cheat this, and you could run one of these SNS players, like in that last where I was this SNS flail, right? And we had that flail IG that was the IGL. And this slot did not run relentless, they just went heavy. And then I went relentless in this slot. That is very, very greedy, and is why I said before the war I expect to have 5 deaths. I think I had 4, and 2 of those were in fort, so I'll take that as a win. But relentless is extremely hard to play. It is extremely easy to just get crashed on and die. For reference, you take about 40% more damage with relentless than you do with a typical tank build, which tank builds are tanky, but you're basically playing like you're in heavy IGVG, but you're sitting in the middle of a clump crash. So it's extremely challenging to actually live in those situations where you have 10 to 15 deados popping on you, and often requires really good main tank play and requires really good healer play in order to keep that player alive. So one way to kind of get this player to be more tanky is if they have a flail as a main hand. Let's see if I got kicked here or not. Did not get kicked. But flail as a main hand allows you to do is that you could run mitigated protection. Mitigated protection is flat damage reduction. So if you use mitigated protection, this is like about the same as saying I'm running Void Dark Plate versus not running Void Dark Plate. It is like a very, very big reason to really force the flail in spots where you want to be tanky, and flail IG is a tankier class than SNS IG is a tankier class in SNS flail. So mitigated protection provides a lot of value, and is why that slot is often used for relentless if you don't want to be greedy about it, because it's the class that is best set up in a situation where it can consistently live as long as you're blocking a little bit to activate mitigate protection. If you need to activate mitigate protection by blocking, a really easy way to do that is through barrage. Barrage will block attacks in the front. Those blocks will trigger mitigated protection, which will reduce the damage of deados, and any attack that's in the front of you that's a deado will also get blocked by barrage. You don't take any stam damage during this, so it's possible to block, eat your full stam bar, then barrage, eat more of the deados, and then kind of get out for free. And is a big reason why I prefer going barrage with this kind of variant of flail, where you're forcing relentless over going something like trip. I think there's a little bit of debate between going smite and with going for bludge, but smite is just like such a good ability that I feel like it's troll to not run. The idea behind going for bludge is you have access to something like best friends. So if I wanted to use the new fortify based gems, which is like one of the only classes where it might make sense to use the new fortify based gems, you could use the fortify based gems, and then use best friends on top of that to hit the maximum gem cap, as well as hitting a really high or a higher armor threshold. So you can effectively mitigate some of the downside from running relentless with that kind of build. It's just you lose the value of having smite, which smite does apply weakens, and weakens reduces people's damage to you. But during a crash, for the most part, people have cleanse pot up, which will mean that weakens don't do anything, meaning that this won't really mitigate damage that's incoming during a crash. So it may make sense to cut smite in some situations and run bludge, but that's like general thought process of why a flail IG is a really good slot for relentless. And then in terms of having 2 SNSs and then a flail IG, when you put your IGL on a spot like Great Axe Warhammer, in the case of like you have World Calling or something like that, it allows you to do that double tank, right? And what double tank allows you to do is like what I had here before, where you have two tanks, one kind of plays on this bot left, is rotating with the pressure up to this top left, which you saw me doing a lot of that war that just happened. And then you have the relentless player that's kind of playing more so in the middle. And what you end up with is basically an aura everywhere on the entire point, meaning anyone can step on the point anywhere at any time, and you can't really get punished for it. There's not a ton of overlap in terms of auras, and you can also help kill squad on the edge of point because your auras extend into there. So the downside of only having one of these is that you have to be balled up in one spot basically all the time to get value out of both of these. Some people I think have tried not using relentless at all and just playing two people wide, but it's just less damage mitigation during a crash, so there's some downside to that too. Or you can go for the trifecta, which I think is probably the best way to play it right now, especially because the meta has been very, very point-centric. I think if the meta was a little bit more focused towards off-point, this wouldn't make as much sense, but in the current meta, this makes a little bit more sense in terms of like trying to maximize the value that you can have there. Firestaff IG is just one of those slots that doesn't take a lot of resources and provides a lot of value. SNS Flail will take a lot of resources. Great Axe Warhammers will take a lot of resources, so it makes sense to have something that's a little bit less intensive in terms of heals in that final slot. I think IGVG also can make sense here, but that's like the only other build I would seriously consider. In terms of the top left and top right groups, these are basically the same groups I had in the other thing. I think these are basically just set in stone at this point, just because Firestaff is just so good at pushing for space because it doesn't eat those precious resources that are needed to keep the IGVGs and the Great Axe Warhammers alive. In terms of bot left and bot right, Spear Hatchet, these are basically mandatory as well because they're just looking inward and they're the class that's like getting a lot of kills in the current meta. Moving on to Kill Squad, which is like where most of the cook stuff kind of happens here. SNS Spear, very, very good. If you're in a 1-3 setup, you need your bond side to be relatively tanky in case the other side goes 10-10 and they're just going to be trying to run through you. In the case where you need to be tanky, SNS Spear makes a lot of sense. I would argue that should be a strong debate. I don't think there is a debate right now that one of these players picks up Relentless. It is very hard to play, but it makes sense to have at least one Relentless on one side of the point just from the value that armor aura gives. IGVG with Blade is really good at holding its own, is good for pushing for space. This is a medium-based build. Firestep IG isn't super heal intensive. So this is just something, like, these are just builds that can exist on their own. You're not really looking for these builds to push into space as much. If you're in a 1-3 setup, you're mostly looking for your bond to hold their own and kind of protect the backline. IGVG can be an enforcer. Firestep IG can be an enforcer. SNS Spear are good at setting the edge. If you are in a spot where you're not getting a ton of value on SNS Spear, it can make sense to swap this last slot to medium with a SNS Great Axe too, I would think. Random question, not to throw you off, but I did a Korg with Hoplite Warhammer, and I'm adding Shockwave. The other perks are Disdained Infliction and Keenly Jagged. Should I save my mats or... Keenly Jagged, I mean, it's not Abyss Warhammer. If you want a budget Warhammer, it's fine. But I think with Warhammer right now, people aren't looking to main hand Warhammer as much with Great Axe Warhammer, mostly because of the addition of Sundering Stacks. And with that, it makes a lot more sense just to stay on the Great Axe, which has that perk, apply rends everywhere, and you don't really worry about the Warhammer as much. But I still think you generally want Shockwave, Trenchant, Strikes, which is damage upon heavy attacks, and Plague Strikes for Warhammer. There is a big downside, though, where Warhammer's tracking, I believe, is nerfed at some point in the last 6 months, so it might not be as good as it used to be, but I think that Warhammer is still best in slot. Going into inner, outer, and wide, main common denominator here is you need to have an SNS Spear. Also noteworthy that these SNS Spears, I don't think a lot of them are running leadership anymore. I think a lot of them are on a defensive aura, and like no one wants to say that they're basically tanks, but they're basically tanks. Like they're holding right click a lot of the time because that aura just allows them to live a lot better and kind of enables people to not have as much pressure on them. But they'll pull out the Scorpion sometimes to disrupt people and just have that extra. I mean, mostly disruption, a little bit of kill pressure, but it's honestly not very strong kill pressure. So that's what that slot's being used for. SNS Great Axe is really good at pushing the tempo. I do have one here with Detonate. I think this is a bit of a take, but I think it's definitely possible to use an SNS Great Axe with Detonate that's on the inner oppa side. So if you have, like, say you're a 3 stack, like you have 3 people on the oppo versus a 2 stack. In those matchups, the way that you win is by racing the other team. You're basically just looking to push around the point as fast as possible, get in the other team's backline and trade kills. In that situation where you're trying to trade kills, detonate is good because it is detonate and it does damage. Like, that's not much of a take. It could also be brought into point, and that's a class that easily could like kind of sneak onto point and do some value as well, because you have Great Axe and you have a Deado. Like, you don't have Maelstrom usually, but you could chuck a Grav in there. You'll be like near full stacks. Well, I guess you have Bloodlust, so you don't even have to worry about stacks. And like you can hit that in there. That's more of a take. This could definitely be stone form, but it's like kind of a cook on my part. IGVG with Blade, pretty consistent. It's and then the fire stuff, IG is pretty consistent as well. I think there's some potential. Like, you could do a little bit of cooking here. Like, if you were to run a Spear IG, which is a cook build, this would be the group to do it in. The reason why you'd run a Spear IG is if you needed help on that edge control, but you also didn't want people to walk for free into your backline, so IG kind of helps with that, kind of like the IGVG. But Spear is just a little bit better than the VG at holding space. I think Void Blade is honestly like 80% of the pressure that Spear has right now, so it's probably fine to run the Void Blade IG, and then you're not really cheating it anyway, so I prefer this. Firestaff IG is just good. Lifestaff Hatchet is just a build that lives a little bit better than Lifestaff Rapier. The reason why you run Rapier on the point groups and for the quad groups is because Rapier allows you to position from point A to point B faster and then cast your single target heal, versus Hatchet, you kind of have to commit to being on the Hatchet for a long time. For these kill squad fights, people will typically be on the healers for a long period of time, so it makes sense for them to be on the Hatchet, and if they're on the Rapier, they'll probably just die, to be honest. But the Hatchet lives significantly better. That's also something that I think from the Tenacity War that we just had that probably could have been improved upon in Fort, where all of our healers are complaining. It's like, oh, I can't get away on Rapier, I keep dying. It's like, yeah, you should probably switch to Hatchet. Like, Hatchet just lives better than Rapier. It's just like, you typically don't want to go the Rapier if you can, or like, you don't want to go the Hatchet if you can for the point group, because sometimes you need to get it off a quick heal after you have pressure on top of you. Like, people look to pressure healers and then crash the point at the same time. So if you can get out of dodge for a little bit and then cast a single target, that can be ideal, but you know, you have to adapt, and Lifestaff Hatchet is that adaptation to live better. IGVG with Blade is good. This group 9, this is a triple DPS with IGVG, so it's really a quad DPS group. This is something that we're starting to see a little bit more of, but it's kind of greedy. You need to have pressure in order for this to do well, and it makes sense to do this in a 3 stack, right? Because if you're doing 3 groups on one side, you should be hard winning. You should have pressure. So triple melee makes sense in that situation. IGVG it's not like Firestaff IG where it's like you don't need heals, but it's a little bit less heal dependent. The less greedy variant of this slot would probably be dropping the SNS Hatchet, at least outside of Fort, and then picking up like a Bow Hatchet. Bow Hatchet is still a build that's used. We saw a few of them in the last war. The main reason why you'd run a Bow Hatchet over a Firestaff is it lives better when it's pressured. So it could actually live versus these quad melee groups. It has enough tools to gain distance to live, and most importantly, it has access to Hatchet. Firestaff Hatchet isn't really a thing. Firestaff IG can live, but it doesn't live nearly as well as Bow Hatchet does. So it's like, I think it's a build that kind of makes sense there. SNS Hatchet is a light assassin build. Sometimes you see these in pairs, but this is the build that is like the 2 for Esk 5 con, I'm going to delete everyone from the game kind of build that is currently meta. And it destroys healers if it's left in check. It especially destroys people that are kept locked down by SNS Great Axe, especially when they have a Rapier. So it is very, very good at farming normal healers. And that's kind of a specialist build for that. IGVG has pressure, but it doesn't farm people and kill people nearly as fast. Group 10 for wide fight. This is a very specific fight that has like their own 5v5 meta. I'm not completely aware of what their 5v5 meta is, but I know SNS Great Axe is definitely part of it, and Scorpion can make some sense as a tech item. This could also be a normal spear. The reason why I thought Scorpion might make sense here is if you are SNS Great Axe and you have double bow, like your bows are the people that are looking to mostly chunk people and get the kills. SNS Great Axe is looking to kind of lock people in place, so Scorpion's like a way to get people closer to you for your SNS Great Axe to lock them down. I'm saying this, and now like it honestly, like you could probably go either way with SNS Spear, SNS Scorpion. I think SNS Spear is probably the more common one, so you should probably just switch that to that. But both of those should be viable, and bows are in place here because they can live well. And this healer is going to have a lot of pressure on them, so you don't want stuff that's as heal intensive in a wide fight typically. So that was my cook for kind of my ideal situation with the point team and with the quads and with the kill squad. I do think the kill squad has a lot of variance and is in a solved meta right now, but I'd say point teams and quad teams are basically solved. The only slot that's been debated recently is these IGVG slots, and I think if you're not running them, you're trolling. And that's kind of it in terms of current meta. I also did like a 10-10 variant, which is just like very similar stuff. Actually, same thing for point team. Well, actually, no. I put in like if your IGL doesn't have hands, and then you want to slot a relentless one, and you want to slot the heavy one. I'm doing the IGL in the point 2 group. A lot of people put the IGL in the point 1 group, but I'd argue that the relentless user needs a lot of help as well. So it could make sense to put the relentless user in the point 1 group. But either way, you can throw them either way in either group. It's just generally what people run. And then in terms of kill squad, if you have a 10-10, the main difference is that you're looking to overload this bond side for the most part. You're looking to maintain this outside, so these tubes are more so here to hold in the existence space. Your group 2 or whatever quad is on that weak side will have a ton of pressure on top of them, and then the other quad is playing really tight to point. The 10-10 strat works effectively by snowballing point from the bond side, while the other kind of 5-15 strat or 1-3 strat works by rotating the kill squad in the other team's backline, kind of farming and pushing inward, and then looking to crash with the showers behind with deados. So you basically look to encircle people and then push in and crash. You just have constant pressure on the point, and what this does really, really well from an attacker standpoint is you're going 10-10 versus a 5-15. If you are playing for point, which is how you should be playing the strat, in my opinion, you effectively force the defense to play attack. The defense will be on a timer because they can't dedicate as many people on point. Like, they're not going to put an extra kill squad basically sitting on the point, and that's what this strat allows you to do. These quads are also really, really comfortable sitting on point in this sort of situation. So you end up with like pseudo 6 to 7 point groups, which is what you started to see towards like the 10-minute mark of that last war, where you just see tons and tons and tons of bodies on point. The quad groups, while they used to be quads and then point centric, like they would work outside in. Recently, they've been working inside out because people aren't dying as much and they can just kind of live with that natural pressure. So it makes sense to kind of help that and snowball that with a 10-10. I think 10-10 makes more sense on attack than defense. Defense, it's really, really risky. You don't really want to push through the bond side as much because they could just turn and wipe your bond, and then it's just GG, you're in the fort. Like, you don't really want to be taking that risk, but on attack, it makes a lot of sense. And on defense, if you're matching a 10-10, I think that can make sense too, but starting off with a 10-10 versus a 5-15 sounds a little bit sketchy to me. Going back to roster, so the main idea is you need to have these wide groups be passive over here and these two be aggressive. So on the bond side, this is the more aggressive side. We have more aggressive builds, like this extra spear hatchet. We have a Firestaff IG that's looking inward towards point. I still have 2 SNS spears. You probably could swap one of these for an SNS Great Axe or like a Sword and Shield hatchet, like a really light assassin build, because that group's basically going to be playing for free. Your aggro and bonds looking to push into space. IGVG makes a lot of sense for that. SNS hatchet makes a lot of sense for that because that build just farms healers, and you're basically just trying to push the advantage and farm healers. SNS Great Axe is really good at pushing in for space. The spear slot at that point is you could flex between Scorpion and normal spear. Both of them should be good because you're looking to pull people in and just blow them up. In terms of the Oppo fight, these groups are looking to exist, so it's a little bit more tanky. SNS spears, these are basically tanks at this point. You're just trying to live. I have 1 Firestaff IG in the wide. And the reason why I forced this is because you really need to have access to ice showers to slow down the opponents from coming on top of you. Like, you don't want them to like just push into you and blow everyone up. So Firestaff IG just kind of allows you to hold that space a little bit better. Spear IG, probably debatable, probably not for wide, but I think one of those can make sense either in inner or in wide just to kind of hold the space a bit. SNS Great Axe, I think, is a little bit weaker with this kind of comp because you're not looking to engage for space, you're looking to hold space. So this is a slot that probably could flex the spear if you wanted to. And then bolt casters, just like with bows in general, are good at living. But they don't have the IG to peel for their team, which then I think you need at least one of those in the kind of situation where you're outmatched. So that's like the high level idea from this. The other kind of funny part, which maybe I should stop here. Do these comps like make a little bit more sense than the ones I put out yesterday for people that were watching yesterday, or am I like off the mark still? Because I think I'm like very like a lot closer than where I was before. Pretty confident with these top 6, and then the other ones I think there could be some movement, but generally most of these slots are kind of locked in. Dang, people quiet today, but I know Apple's is doing his new World League announcement, so some of that is probably from that. But okay. Um, so this is like generally where the meta is right now. Where it's kind of going is a lot more melees, and then where we'll be going, I think, in the middle of New World League, because we already have leaks of the new Heartrune. What the new Heartrune does is it prevents people from being able to dodge until they do damage to somebody else. So, in the case where a crash happens, the new Heartrune will be insane. I think this new Heartrune will come out sometime in the middle of New World League. You can get access to it on the seasonal world right now because it's in one of the boxes, and this is what it looks like. But it is very, very, very big. And if you're hit by this at all, you're not going to be able to dodge. So imagine like one or two of these mid crash, and it prevents everyone from being able to dodge. Like, it's just good night. Like, you're not living that thing at all. So I would expect people to start playing a little bit more scared for crashes. I would expect stuff like you need the ability to live with SNS, like with relentless stacking, with double shield stacking and stuff like that. And in general, to have a comp that is a little bit more kin for this other one for point team, where you go double tank, you have another relentless flail on there, just provide maximum value and try to keep everyone alive. That mid crash is GG's. Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be a nightmare.